Hey Revolutionaries, I'm excited to bring you this week's episode with Sara Kolata, where we're talking about how she helps architects make it rain. That's right, make it rain dollars by going digital. That's right. She calls it something else. She's got a more sophisticated way to get that idea across. She says she's raising the financial well-being of architects, raising their financial well-being. But either way, you get the idea. Yeah, so she helps them with their financial well-being and helps them with their digital transformation. That's what's really cool. So, she helps them figure out how to really, get out there in the digital world, get attention, find their jam, put courses together, put their podcast together, their digital marketing together, whatever it might be, tell their story in a better, bigger way. So it's really cool what she's up to and how she discovered this niche for herself. She started out being an architect. She's still an architect, of course, and serves the architecture community. But she's got a great, interesting story about how she early on in her career wound up in Guatemala. And also, I dig into skydiving with Sara. That's right, skydiving. Has anyone skydived out there? Done a tandem jump? That's how Sara got into it. But she's gone way beyond that by now, which is crazy. And it's very interesting how she thinks about it and what has pushed her to be where she's at right now and why she moved to Barcelona. So listen to the episode for that. But before we get there, I just wanted to check in with everyone and see how your mantras are coming. Have you been practicing your mantras? Repeating your mantras? Did you listen to the kickoff episode? That's what I'm wondering. If you did, you know what I'm talking about. If you're a new listener, go find the kickoff episode for 2022. Check it out and dig into this mantra book I found, My Pocket Mantras, Tanaz Chubb by Tanaz Chubb. It's really cool. And just as a reminder, another example, I'm going to pull one out for you right now. And what inspired me to pull this one out was, I had a weekend away in Western New York recently, a couple weeks ago, with some friends of mine from high school. So buddies I hadn't seen for a while. We all got together. And we were hanging out, and it's by the Finger Lakes, so it's kind of a resorty area, and one of our friends owns some property up there, so we were staying at his property. And we were just talking about, life, and, BSing around like old friends do. Anyways, I got on this kick of talking about joy with some of my friends because, some of them are stressed out. They live a different lifestyle than I do, and I feel for them. And I try to give them the insights that I figured out over the years. I say, hey, when you are feeling joyful and positive, life gets simpler. Your decisions get better. Things start to fall in place. You get more centered. But when you're not joyful and positive, when you're really stressed out, and I know this because I've been through these phases in my life as well, especially like related to work things when I, ended up quitting my job. That's how I got to where I am now. I just quit one day. Just remember that. Don't be afraid to quit. Anyways, but when you're in this other zone of being stressed and too busy and overworked and all those kinds of things, it's kind of a downward spiral, right? And it pulls you down and you don't make good decisions. So here's the mantra that inspired me by just some of the conversations we had over the weekend. And it is, I deserve to feel joyful and positive. I deserve to feel joyful and positive. I deserve to feel joyful and positive. Right, keep repeating it. Remember what you're trying to do? You're trying to program your brain. That's why the repetition works. And it works best when you do it slowly. I deserve to feel joyful and positive. You do it slowly so you can really wrap your brain around it and do it multiple times. And you'll probably soon feel the side effects when some negative thoughts come into your mind or something negative happens externally. You're not going to be as easily okay with it. You're not going to put up with it like you usually do. Because you deserve to feel joyful and positive. And you might just end up pushing some of those real negative people that are bad for you out of your life, That would be a good thing. So anyways, that's just a reminder to, if you haven't checked out that kickoff episode, last episode, I think it was episode 90, check it out. Feel the power of the mantra. So I'm still into it, and I'm going to be trying to keep working at this all this year. So There you go. All right, that's all I got for you on that tip. So let's get to this week's episode with Sara.
Welcome to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, the show that explores reinvention in the digital age as it relates to career, creativity, and technology. Stay tuned for interviews with professionals, entrepreneurs, and creatives that have reimagined success and are making a pivot. If you'd like to listen to the entire back catalog, visit JimJim'sReinventionRevolution.com for instant access. And now, here's your host, Jim.
Hey everybody, hey, this is Jim. Welcome to episode 91 of Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. I'm talking today with Sara Kolata, and we're talking about raising the financial well-being of architects. So Sara, welcome to the Reinvention Revolution.
Thank you so much for having me, Jim.
Well, I can't wait to dig into this with you because we have, before we dig into it, actually, I wanted to bring up our mutual friend, Aya Schlachter, because that's how we got connected. And so I wanted to give her a shout out, and I'm so glad that we are connected, and you've done a lot of cool work for her and with her, which is really cool, which we'll talk about the scope of that in a second. But before we get going, I wanted to also find out where you were. We mentioned this before we got going. You're still in Berlin, right?
I did live in Berlin up to about 3 months ago, and then I moved to Spain. So now I'm in Spain.
Okay, I couldn't remember because I was, looking at your story. I'm like, yeah, she did tell me Berlin, but okay. So what prompted you to move down to Spain now?
Actually, I started to skydive at the end of the summer, and in Northern Europe, in Northern Europe, all the drop zones are closed in the winter. So when I did my license, which enabled me to skydive alone and basically jump out of planes alone.
Oh my God. Okay.
I decided that I want to continue throughout the winter to practice and that I didn't want to take a break from it. So that's why I decided to move to Spain. Spain has a few drop zones that are open throughout the year.
Oh, okay. How warm or cold is it there? What's the temperature like? Is like what part of Spain? Southern Spain, maybe Barcelona area or something like that?
Yeah, I'm in Barcelona, which is northern part of Spain, and it is a bit colder. I didn't expect that. In fact, when I moved here, I didn't take as many sweaters as I should have, and so I had to rebuy, stuff for winter. But it is cold, but it's very crispy, a nice visibility, not so much rain or clouds. It's rather, I would say, a lot of times a minus temperature, but the sky is clear and the air is very crispy and cold, and so that's nice for doing outdoor activities, because even though it's cold, when you dress nicely, you can still have the sun,
right,
and the fresh air. So it feels really good. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's awesome. Well, that's cool. I knew we were going to talk about skydiving at some point in this episode, but I didn't realize that was the impetus for the move. Oh, that's really cool. Okay. Wow, you're dedicated to that. All right, we're going to come back to that in a second. So you see why I, she's like, hey, you got to get to know Sara and connect with her more, which I appreciate. And just a reminder for everybody out there who's been listening, MGS Global, Aya's company, she's the CEO and founder of that, mgsglobalgroupnow.com. She was the sponsor of the podcast for about 2 years. So people out there listening might remember her. We're still good friends. We still work together. And I think her information is still on JimJim'sReinventionRevolution.com under the sponsor section, but not official sponsor anymore. But that's fine. We still work together. I still love her a lot. So, and I found her. She's got a testimonial video on your website, so I wanted to mention that so people that might know Aya or MGS through the show, go check that out on on Sara's website, which she'll give out here at the end of the episode here. Okay, now that I got all that done, let's go back to you and hear what's been going on. So tell me, first of all, let's dig into how you are raising the financial wellness of architects first, and then we'll dig back into your story because you really have an interesting journey of how you got here. But what are you doing right now? What's this all about?
Yeah, so, I'm an architect myself, and unfortunately, globally, the industry is quite underpaid. And I would say that even though it takes us many years to, get the full education and to actually be a chartered architect, it's really hard to get well-paid positions, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So people start with actually either for free working as interns, or a lot of times even pay for their internships, and then slowly start climbing the ladder. But unfortunately, you know, the pay and the conditions of work are poor all around the world, because you're expected to work overtime, and and there's a lot of sort of things like that within the culture, the working culture of architects, that make it quite sad for considering how exciting it is to become an architect and to design houses. But the reality and then the implementation of it all looks a little bit different. And I think that at some point, what happens is that a lot of people will have a little bit of a wake-up call and a realization that it's not all as they thought it will be when they started to study architecture. And, you know, specifically when I talk about raising the financial well-being of architects, we're working on several sort of modalities. We're talking about belief systems and mindset, and you know, what does it mean to bring value and exchange value, and so sort of basic stuff about economy and entrepreneurship. But then we go deeper into also understanding how you can make money as an architect via diversifying your income sources. So, for example, going into consulting, positioning yourself as a teacher, as an expert, writing and publishing on your expertise, and developing all of that sort of all these different, so to speak, aspects of your brand online. So I specifically teach a lot about digital transformation and business development for architects. And so some of the projects that I do is organizing conferences where we bring to stage people that are specifically running the business side of things for big architecture practice. So business developers of huge architects that are building like the New York skyline, big group, or SOM, Gensler, and bringing to stage people that are actually responsible for their branding and communications and marketing, and really trying to lead with that expertise and under a tag that success leaves clues. And we want to look at what successful people are doing to attract really high quality clients and big projects. And so that's one side of things. And then the other is obviously my coaching and consulting business. And frankly, the way I know Aya is that she was one of my first clients when I started to be a consultant.
Right.
So I helped her create an online course as an architect, and now she's helping other architects with that. So it's been quite a interesting collaboration. And she certainly is a great example of an architect who thinks very entrepreneurially about her career and about her business. And she's very keen to diversify, adapts new technologies and new ideas. And so this is also why I've been, honored to work with her on that part of her project. And just, hoping for more open-minded architects like that to want to kind of better and develop their businesses. Right.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, from your perspective, and that just I can't say enough good things about Aya. She's just got the right mindset. She's super cool. She's not afraid to take a chance. And you're up front, you guys met, and you're like, yeah, let's try this. She's like, believed in you. She obviously figured you out very quickly, and really got a ton of benefit out of it. Because I was kind of just a little fly on the wall during when you guys first met, and she would be like, "Yeah, what are you doing?" I'm like, "What are you doing with her? She's doing what for you? Oh my God!" So she built this course, and you really helped her out a lot in terms of just developing her mindset or teaching her some of the tools. She's got a great mindset, but she wasn't experienced with some of the tools and how to do all that for herself with her website. So it was really cool, and it's just interesting that she had the same kind of perspective in the terms of architecture and how it can be a challenge for creatives, because people, I think, that go into architecture, they're a little bit more arts oriented versus an engineer, like construction or something that's a little bit different, right? And some of those people, again, they're just so passionate about the creative and artistic part. but that doesn't necessarily translate into the revenue part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the biggest problem really is that at design school, they teach you design, not business. So to be honest, I think there is currently just a handful of schools that actually have business as a major that you can choose within the architecture school, that you can also choose business to study.
Right.
But mostly, if you go to architecture, you will end up being an architect and have very little understanding of business. But in most cases, if you do want to be successful, you want to start your own practice, you have to know something about business.
Right.
And this is where people struggle, and it's supposed to be designed such that you apparently getting that knowledge when you practice and you go to work for someone else.
Right.
But a lot of times, and I'm guessing it's easy to imagine, big corporate environment, you just end up getting the job that you're supposed to be doing and not the full spectrum of how a business is being run.
Right.
So oftentimes you will be perhaps leasing even with clients, but not really understanding how the business is getting these clients and developing those relationships with these clients. And so therefore, you don't get the full spectrum of experience that you need if you wanted to have your own business.
Right. Well, let me ask you a question on that, because I think this was maybe traditionally or like an older understanding. This is just some guessing here, but that's what I want to ask you. In terms of architects, like the profession, like similar to doctors and lawyers, I think people might go into that profession thinking that someday I will have my own business, because that's sort of a concept with those professional type of careers that, someday I'll have my own firm. Is that a thing within architecture, or do most people that go into it assume they're going to have a corporate job, or what's the feel of it?
So oftentimes people do dream that they will start their own businesses, yes. But I think that the industry makes it specifically hard for you.
Okay.
First is that within education already, we're very much taught that if you're not at that very senior level or an absolute expert in what you're doing, you shouldn't really stick your head out. So from the very beginning, you're kind of taught to just, really move at your own pace and not be different or too innovative, especially if it comes to entrepreneurship. So we're generally not encouraged to start businesses too soon. And then from the perspective of how the industry works in respect of practice, if you do decide to go and work for someone else, it is going to be impossible for you to leave that employment, start on your own with anything that you can show for yourself. Because if you want to continue working for other people, you leave one employment and go to another. You take the portfolio of work of all the different designs you've done for this business, and then you show it to your new employer, and you most likely will get a job, and you just continue. However, if you want to go on your own, you can't use that portfolio of work you've built for someone else and say it's yours, because that's IP kind of, intellectual property rights. So you can't just go there and say, listen, I worked for this architect for 10 years and I've done this project and this is what I can show you that I can do. You can't do that to your new client because technically you don't have the IP of that project. So what happens is people are sort of faced with this risk that when they leave employment and they start their own business, they're going to have to build from zero, from complete scratch, put down foundations and start building their own business. And where do you get your first clients to trust you? It's not always the number one question. But then, of course, because architecture, it's not an instant gratification sort of industry. It's not like you design a piece of sweater and, within 1 year you have 4 different collections you can bring, like in fashion.
Right.
In architecture, you will be designing and building and implementing and finishing off the construction in 1, 2, 3, 5 year time.
Sure.
So in order to deliver that project, it takes so long. So it does really take a long time to build a portfolio and a reputation for yourself in that industry. And so a lot of people are just afraid, to start, do that, to take all of that on their own hands and risk being unknown, underpaid, or perhaps not getting the clients that would get the ball rolling.
Right. Sounds like you might need a runway of 2 to 3, 4 years or something to really be able in terms of taking that risk, and not everybody has that kind of financial resources or time or whatever it might be. Interesting. Yeah. So, well, who would be your ideal client, that you're speaking to that would, who's in the right mindset that's going to be like, you know what, the stuff that you can teach people that they would be open to it, Are you looking for big corporate people because they've got a lot of experience already to kind of break away? Or are you looking at people coming out of school, or what is it?
Honestly, anyone. It could be a very young person. It could be someone who is already retired and just tired of the way they live their life so far. Because let's admit that if you're in employment, you're kind of always dependent on that employment, and you always get a paycheck that is predictable. You can't just make it bigger because of trying harder, or you don't really have much of your own freedom to play with. So if someone wants to exit that rat race of working 9 to 5 for someone else and having a predictable paycheck every month, and wants to become an entrepreneur, start a business, and say, you know what, whether it's in architecture and design or whatever, I've got my skills and I can add value to another person's lives. And I know that if I start a business, service-based business or a consultancy-based business, I can do that and take my career in my own hands. And that's the sort of mindset I'm looking for. And now if that person is 21, so be it. But I do also work with clients that are already over 60, and they have been running perhaps their practices on their own for a few years, but have been struggling with really putting their business on the Google Maps as a mark and making a difference. And so they hire me to help. And mostly what we focus on is bringing in better clients, better projects, but also branding, redefinition of branding, redesigning websites, and essentially everything what it takes to communicate your value better to a customer.
I see. I got it. Okay, cool. Well, that's good, because it's, sometimes people listening to this podcast, they see the title, the niche that you're in, they're like, well, I'm not sure it's right for me, though. You know what I mean? So they need to hear, I think they need to hear that, like, okay, well, maybe it is right for me. Like different ages, different levels of experience. I'm sure there's something that you can help them out with. Well, all right. So having understood what your offerings are now, okay, I think it's really cool. What I am always interested in is people's stories behind this, like how they got here, how they developed their own mindset, how they broke away, how they were able to change their lifestyle into something that I think is available in many different ways now to everybody, rather than just solely the 9 to 5. I mean, if that's your thing, that's cool. But what were you thinking? Because you went to school, you became an architect, and when you got out of school, somehow you ended up in Guatemala, which is quite, because you went to school in London, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a little bit weird to me. And by the way, so if you haven't noticed yet, Sara is a really good storyteller, and this is part of her power of what she can bring to the party in terms of helping you with understanding how to market yourself and putting yourself online. But if you go to her website, SaraKolata.com, we'll mention it again at the end, under her About page, she's got this great background story of being in Guatemala and what happened to her. And I'll tell you what, I just was reading it the last couple of days. It's awesome writing. Like, it was just I was like, man, she did what? And it was an interesting read. So if you're interested, check it out. But she's going to tell us about it right now, a little bit about it right now. So go ahead.
Yeah, I probably tell a shorter version on my website, like a longer version, because there's a lot of different moving parts that kind of,
there were that I didn't know about. And I was like, that's why it's so interesting. I have to mention it. I usually don't mention it, things like that. I'm like, you go to the website later and check it out. But I thought, this is interesting. It was fun. It was a fun to read.
Thank you. Honestly, I graduated in London, and starting in London, it's honestly like a heartbeat of architecture. There is everything. This the best schools.
Right. Absolutely.
That in fact, the alumni of these schools, such as IA, the Bartlett, are famous architects. So oftentimes when they come back to school to do a lecture or something like that, you actually first-handly can meet celebrity architects, at the at your school, at the library, or just even in a hall passing by. Oftentimes you'll see people that you will recognize, from the industry, and that was great, because I studied in Central St. Martin's, but my school was so close to the Bartlett and the AA that I would go often to use their library or just go into lectures, because they had those great influencers coming in and speaking about architecture. So studying there was really phenomenal from the experience of who you could meet, but also organized galleries and exhibitions and red wine and just chats till the evening, and the amount of people you could meet there, all obviously into architecture, but such interesting personalities. So I'll never forget that for sure. And I think that back then everything was possible, and I was kind of really had this big city viewpoint onto architecture, with old culture and whatever. And we were very, very much sort of starstruck by this celebrity culture in architecture. So the famous architects and what they built, and the mega structures of how they develop in China, and building the New York skyline or London skyline, and winning different prizes and rewards, etc. So that was very much the culture there, and in many respects I didn't really know any different. So I guess when I first started my internship, which was when I graduated and I went to China, to Shanghai, to work for an office that was actually called Architecture Studio, very uninventive as a name, but I went to work for them, and they've been working in collaborations with big architects on quite big sort of urban planning, mega scale developments. And it was the first time where, in a way, my dream came true to work in a big office. I've been working, I was lucky enough to work on design development. So I wasn't just drawing toilets only, but a big part of it was also to do just CAD work. And in my profession, we call it CAD monkey. So a person that just sits in front of a computer, in front of the black screen of an AutoCAD, and just, constantly draws yellow and red or pink magenta lines. And essentially, like the boring, brainless side of production of design, but I was thankfully also involved in the design team, and it was really fun. However, I started to realize that perhaps in some respect the way that the projects were being delivered were very commercial and in a way megalomaniac, and maybe missing a little bit of a sort of human element. And as I was living in China and exposed to, the sort of the beauty of Shanghai, I was walking to work every morning. I was walking to work every morning, passing by this square where there was a lot of poor people living, and it was sort of right next to People's Square, so in the very center of Shanghai, and I became very curious of that place. And one day I wandered in there, and I actually realized that there was a lot of poor people that originally owned the lands of where Shanghai was built, but then, big corporations most likely bought those lands away. And these people just ended up sort of squished into that one square in the middle of the center. And it was sort of like misplacement of that community, but also the reality of how here we are in the center of Shanghai, where there is Mercedes-Benz and all these big headquarters of the huge banks, global banks, and you would see the major kind of commerce happening even through the logos. When you look at Shanghai, you see on the logos of the buildings, what corporations are running the city. And then in the same time, you have these people that originally lived there that somehow just got forgotten, and somehow just lost in translation, I would say, through all that commerce that was happening.
Right.
That really touched me. I think maybe I was at a time where I was kind of looking for a little bit more meaning in what I was doing, and asking myself, okay, now I'm getting, my degree as an architect, but what's next? Am I just gonna be one of these designers that is just designing for beauty, or is there gonna be more meaning to it? And I think that certainly at the time that really touched me, and I realized that we were working for a lot of projects that were very fake. Like we did, for example, fake islands and fake fake, like we would do urban planning design. So we would design cities and then put like artificial lakes and artificial islands there just for beauty purposes, but very much manipulating nature even and creating artificial nature environments. And in a way, that's exactly what cities are. But I realized how dumb that was and how much money was going into it, and that things could be also done differently if people wanted to work with nature. But no one cared in that specific environment about any of these type of principles. And when I started to think about sustainability or human value and human-centric design, those principles were somehow not shared within this particular environment. And so I think it was the first time when I started to seek answers into, the meaning of design and perhaps, the value that it can really bring to society and economy and ecology. And that's when I started to get more and more interested in sustainable design, and that kind of brought me into humanitarian design. And strangely enough, in London, I really never.
Let me jump in here. Say that phrase one more time. What brought you to humanitarian design? That's an interesting shift of a phrase. Say that again. What was it? Yeah,
I was just looking into all these topics of like sustainability and looking for more meaning perhaps in design. I started to expose myself more into these topics, and I discovered humanitarian design. And the funny thing is that in London, it never crossed my mind. I never even thought about it.
Okay, that's what I wanted to probe you a little bit on, because why is not humanitarian design at the top? Shouldn't that be the first thought about? I mean, we have to design it for us. Who else are we designing it for?
Exactly.
Right? That's interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. And unfortunately, oftentimes when we put a human being at the center, it's, the investor or the client. And because money is a luxury, oftentimes that's where you will see that the design attention goes into luxury. And so in many respects, perhaps there are real solutions to problems, but they're not that important. You know what I mean?
Right,
it's not like a problem of life or death, or it's not a problem of poverty. It's not a problem of hunger.
Right.
It's a problem of that maybe doesn't matter all so much. It's just design. And so I guess that's where I wanted to find more meaning. And I started to attend more and more conferences on human-centered design and sustainability as well. And that's where one day in Berlin, in fact, I attended a conference at TU Berlin, Technical University of Berlin, and they invited these architects who basically did a lot of human-centered design. These were people that traveled the world. They would work at projects that were to deliver, because a lot of times they worked with communities and development. So parts of the world that develop faster, like Africa or Asia or India. And hence, because of that, they actually had gigantic portfolios of work. They were building nonstop. They were building in community aspects. So really working a lot with the people that were receiving the projects in participatory methods. So that was really beautiful. And I will never forget the fact that their faces looked tanned and they just looked like they had happiness in their eyes. You know, them smiley eyes when people like smile a lot in the sun, especially, and you get like them little wrinkles on the side of the eyes. This is what I saw in these architects, and I thought, oh my God, this is how I want to be, I want to grow up. I want to be like this happy architect.
Right. You were pale and sad at the time, right? You were like, wait a second. I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's interesting.
And so I guess that's really what brought me to decide to start a charity. And I wanted to work with natural materials to build with earth. And I knew that on the global scale, indigenous people and people that still live with nature have the knowledge of how to utilize nature for construction.
Right.
And it's probably those people that need the help the most. And so sort of following that chain of thought, I looked at what populations have the highest indigenous population, and it was Bolivia and Guatemala. And I decided upon Guatemala to move there. And so this is really how I ended up moving to Guatemala and starting a charity there.
Wow, interesting. So you just moved there. You had this idea of starting the charity. Did you just kind of drop in first and then kind of get a lay of the land before it gelled in your mind what you were going to actually do, or how'd that work?
Yeah, I actually went there, and because I didn't speak Spanish, I first got a job at a local charity as an architect, and they were building a lot. They were building houses and also schools and clinics. So indeed, there was a lot of projects for me, and I got involved with that. And then quite soon after, I realized that they did work a lot with concrete, and so they were raising money in America to deliver projects in Guatemala, but most of the materials, building materials and everything that they were buying were actually coming from corporations that were still owned by America, but within, building material corporations and building suppliers that were locally sort of sold in Guatemala, but the bosses and the businesses were American. So what that told me is that the money, even though it was raised in America with the intention of boosting the economy of Guatemala, actually was directly going back to a pocket of an American, where probably they never even paid to local taxes, yet alone for the money to actually boost up local economy or help local people.
I see.
And so I started to propose to work with a little bit more awareness as to where we source the materials, and could we potentially hire local carpenters to do the school windows and doors, and could we, work with local builders on sourcing materials locally, etc. But that was just a lot of work, and it's not really sort of the priority for a lot of these businesses. So
I was going to say the businesses that go down there, they're in business, so they're looking for profit margins and all those other things. It's not that they may not want to do that. It's just sort of like the project probably wouldn't work if they did it that way for their purposes. They might, but other people would maybe be interested in doing it differently. But yeah, that's just sort of the rub when you kind of go into these economies that are so the dynamic range is so different. You're like the U.S. economy is way at the top, and this is way much at the bottom. That doesn't mean one's better or worse. It's just it's disconnected. It's different, so it's hard to kind of meet in the middle.
Exactly, and there's nothing wrong in it, except that basically when you looked closer, it was like these people were getting the bread all the time, but not being taught how to make bread, or giving a fish, but not being taught how to fish. So in fact, a lot of that support was unsustainable, and it was making these people dependent on the charity to keep delivering solutions in form of, whether medical treatments or food, or actually providing houses and education buildings. So, at that time, I learned already Spanish, and I thought, it's time for me to start my own charity. Even if we do it on a smaller scale, I want to do it properly. And I developed some relationships then with also American churches and some organizations that were already helping the local community. So it was easier to tap into funding. And so we started to sponsor projects and build. And it was great. I was 25 at a time. So I really loved the level of responsibility, but also the ability to design and build my own projects and deliver them fully to completion. So that was definitely a great experience from a perspective of running a project, distributing money, managing people, teams of people, and in fact, seeing them all the way through till the end. But with time, also the business side of things started to become a little bit challenging, I've got to say. And one side of it was because I didn't know much about business and I wasn't educated in business. And the second was because it was a charity after all. And as much as I had to pay salaries, and I had an engineer, and we had architects in the house that were helping to design, and then 40 builders, and everyone was on a salary, and everyone who was coming to work for me was coming to work for a business. And one day I just realized I'm not actually running a business. I'm running a charity. And as much as I want this to be a business, it's not working in the respect of being able to make the type of profit margin to afford, the operations and everything, and pay myself a salary, which I haven't been doing for most of the time. And it was very hard. And so at that point I was reaching 30, and the dream was starting to fade in some respects, perhaps because I was also reaching another stage of my own life where I saw myself as a person that wants to, come to money as well one day, and not just do everything.
You don't want to be poor your whole life, right?
Yeah. And kind of grow up a little bit as well, like career-wise grow up, and financially to grow up. And I thought, okay, it's time for me to take another step. And then that point, really, nothing better came to mind but to go and study marketing and business, because I thought I'm never going to go back to being an employer anymore. I know that. And so whatever I choose to do in my life for the future, it's going to be something entrepreneurial. And so the one thing I need is business knowledge and marketing knowledge. And so I ended up saving some money and working some seasonal jobs to put money aside for that. And I educated myself in digital marketing and in business development. I did a bunch of conferences as well. And, I went to Tony Robbins and Grant Cardone and all these great business people of America. And I guess reason for that was also to learn and to see how things can be done differently and take inspiration, from people that actually are doing it. And that's where I kind of started to see more and more the patterns, so to speak, of how people develop their presence online and using digital transformation tools, build businesses that actually are based on coaching, consulting, and helping, communities through education and through coaching. And it was really all kind of established on the power of video, podcasting, providing value that way, creating online courses, and then building community around that in order to help solve their problems, And I started to basically share what I was learning with architects. And what got me into that idea was an architect who was helping me out in Guatemala, Charlie Rendell. He is a British architect, and he is an incredible master of his craft if it comes to bamboo and earthen building. And he was so good at it. I mean, a real craftsman, a real artist, and he does it so well. And his buildings are super beautiful. Charlie is not, a great name in the industry. And at the time, he didn't even have a website, or he had some website and then it was taken down, whatever. But basically, he wasn't working on being recognized. He was just really good at what he's doing and humble with that. And I just thought about, how much I've learned from him over the years and how many lives he could change if he were to spread, his expertise and share with other people, and also actually be recognized, around the world. And so a simple website and a simple communication strategy can do that. And so I really thought that by sharing what I've learned with people like Charlie, we can make a difference of being able to circulate higher quality education that comes from practice, not only university centralized knowledge, on architecture, but actually learning from one another and in a professional manner, and getting skill sets that are specific for different geographic locations, but also for different niche topics in architecture, like in this case, bamboo and earth building, right?
I see.
And so this is really where all of this started and originated. And I started to help people like Charlie to develop online presence, find clients, and also create online courses. And this is sort of what I'm still doing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I mean, I think it's so interesting that, you know, how your path, kind of your career path goes, and how your mindset starts to change, you know, as you get older or just get more experienced or run into the right person or have the right experience. I mean, it's so interesting. And like everyone knows by now, you know, the whole internet is here. We're connected in this different way, and you can really have an impact if you so choose, you know, a bigger impact if you understand how to use these tools. And I think, you know, the people that are, and, you know, maybe the time you were going through school is an issue for some. You know, maybe if you're older and you didn't have those tools at you know, when you were going through college, for example, maybe you're not appreciating what's really going on. That's not true for everyone, of course. And it's not even true for young people even. I think some people just miss what's happening. They're just missing what the capability is now in terms of if you do understand the technologies. And you know, that's one of the questions I have for you is, when you went through school, you were focused on architecture, learning, you know, the design and the elements, you know, being the subject matter expert in what you're learning. You didn't get the business tools. Was it a struggle, or how much of a struggle was it for you in terms of when you decided, okay, this is what I need to learn. I need to learn digital marketing. I got to get into, you know, websites and podcasting and online courses and how to develop those things. I mean, you know, the technical back end of how to do it now. What did that feel like when you had to train yourself? When you knew, like, oh my God, there's no other way to do this. This is the way to go. Was it like overwhelming, or this, like, it's got to be frustrating when you first start?
You know what? I think that the hardest thing was that I kept telling myself that I'm really old, and that I found myself in this situation because I really felt stuck, and there wasn't one solution for the problem. It wasn't like I was looking for a fix, a pill, or a medicine for the problem. And instead, I discovered that, you know, not knowing about business or marketing, I need to really deep dive into a topic which is gigantic, bigger than me. And here I am already at the age of 30, not even knowing exactly where life, you know, what else life holds in for me. And even if I wanted to start a design practice and continue to design, I understood the importance of getting that knowledge, despite the fact that I already am a designer, and probably by devoting myself more into it, I would have these years committed to building a better portfolio and better relationship with potential clients. But it became apparent that I need to take that break to learn those skills. And you know, it was hard at the time. I didn't know where it's taking me, and I was lost. Certainly, I felt lost. I felt a little bit of a sense of a failure because I was taught that I will be an architect, and that's how I used to think of myself. So what am I doing now, and where is that taking me? I'm not wanting to be a marketer. You know, that's not the future I've seen for myself. And I guess I kind of did it and went through with it anyway. And now looking back, all I see is that not much changed outside of the fact that now I just have more knowledge, and that gave me more confidence. And so when I used to think that I was a bit old to start again, now I'm 35, so 5 years passed. And I look at myself as a person that it's not just an architect, but I also am good with business and marketing, and I'm only 35. So, you know, it felt like maybe it was really late to start something new, but I only stacked up more experience and more knowledge and expertise onto what I already had. And that makes me today a better, more tenacious, I guess, business person. And where I can see a lot of possibilities and draw inspiration from a lot of different industries, you know, the tech industry, but I also still feel committed and devoted to architecture. And I don't want to walk away from this industry, you know, of architecture and reinvent myself completely.
Right.
I'm rather seeing how I can help, you know, people like me with the skills that I've learned.
Right. Well, I think it's just so instructive and just inspiring to understand that this is the the challenge, I guess, that's presented to many of us now, where it's like, man, I didn't learn that in school, or I didn't have any connection to that, or I see what's happening over there, but that's not me. You know, you have these crazy stories in your head all the time that you can't master it, or you wouldn't be good at it, or whatever. And I think it just ends up that it's just not usually the case. And if you take the time to dig into it, I think it's really fruitful. And like, there was a good kind of way to describe it, that you're just sort of stacking skills on top of the skills you already had. And now you're just more well-rounded, more well-versed in all the aspects that will really be fruitful for you. You know, not just, you know, your passion that you initially had, but things that will really create abundance in your life and abundance for others. So that's what's fun about it. Certainly that's what's fun for me, like trying to help people with their own reinvention as I try to reinvent myself, you know. That's just kind of where things are at these days. Well, look, part of your, when we talked earlier, was in terms of being able to change, is kind of doing this disruption, working on your mindset. And you were telling me offline before that somehow you got into skydiving. I want to cover this before we finish the episode, because I think it's so fascinating that you got into it on a whim, I think. And then now I had no idea that you moved to Spain specifically to continue skydiving. So I need to hear more about this story. So how did you... And where did you discover skydiving? Was that in Berlin once you got through with your Guatemala experience, or?
Yeah, so on the way out of Guatemala, I went to the States to do all these different trainings. And in fact, I was in Florida for Tony Robbins' event, and I met a couple of people there. And it was a new year, 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And they said, hey, let's go and do a tandem jump, you know? And it was in Orlando where I did a tandem jump. And that was an incredible experience. I remember being super scared. And then the door just opens when we're up there. And, you know, you just see like the little city below.
Right.
And it's like, okay, now you just have to sit at the edge of the thing and just kind of push yourself off of it. And, you know, the guy was attached to me, mm-hmm. But you don't really see him. You just kind of feel like you're falling head down.
Right.
And I remember I just thought to myself, oh, this is so scary. I don't even know if I'm going to survive this, but I just have to trust the experience. I have to trust that it's going to be fine, because mm-hmm. there's nothing else I've got.
Right.
And that sort of was quite a strong experience. I had some metaphysical thing that I felt there. Very like so taken by fear. And then at the end, everything was so beautiful. When the parachute opened, we were just hanging there. It was the sun was going down. Everything was sort of golden, red and orange. And I felt complete silence. There was absolutely no noise up there.
Right.
And I thought, what an incredible, pristine place to be in. And how amazing that like you're surviving and then you're hanging off of that tiny little parachute. You know, if you think about it, I sometimes see my friends jump and from my window, and they're just tiny little parachutes in the sky. And you know that it's a human being hanging off of it, you know?
Right.
That was that kind of experience. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. And I still didn't really think much of it as of maybe I will ever like become a skydiver or anything. But I think it started there. And I think I wanted that sort of ultimate empowerment to be able to do it completely on my own without actually having to jump attached to someone who's doing it for me, but just completely on my own. And so end of this summer, it was 2 years into Corona, and I've got to say the whole time I was so brave, telling everyone, oh no, it's fine, we're in lockdown, but I'm doing fine, I'm doing great. But I actually did get a little bit depressed, and I did get a little bit affected by being in lockdown.
Right.
And I think
certainly.
I think that sort of feeling of being trapped or something like that got me to really want to do this. And towards the end of summer this past year, 2021, mm-hmm. I ended up doing the course. And it's great. You know, you sit through the ground school for 10 hours and then they just get you in a plane. They say, now you jump alone and you're going to have to open the parachute on your own.
Oh my God.
And you have to land that parachute on your own.
Yikes.
And it's crazy.
Wait, so okay, how long is the school? It's just like one day, and then they let you jump?
Yeah, it's like one day.
That's it?
It's
I'm
like
thinking like you got to go for like 6-8 weeks or something, you know? Oh my God.
It's easier to learn than to drive, and yet it's like such a crazy thing to do.
Oh,
so
wow.
I was terrified, and I am afraid of heights. When when I'm on the top of a building and I look down, I'm scared. So I thought I would be mortified, but somehow I managed. And then I did the full course, and I was like, okay, now I got an international license. I can jump out of planes alone. Amazing, with a parachute just on me,
That's right.
And you know what, I've got to tell you, something that came a little bit later was the realization of how much it taught me about self-responsibility. Because really, when you are in that plane and the door opens and you got the backpack, the parachute on your own, and everything needs to be on, there's an IAD, which just in case it will explode a parachute if you, for example, lose consciousness, right? Something will open. You're not just going to die. So that's one. And then another is just generally making sure you're really tucked in and everything is closed and you're properly in there, right? Because at some point you'll be hanging off of that backpack. And if you're not, if you could just fall out of it, then that's on you. And that's the whole thing, is you realize that when you there and you got to check everything is fine, everything, I'm ready, you take that responsibility for your life, because no one in the air is just gonna come in like Superman and help you out if you haven't overlooked something or whatever, right? And you're jumped out of that plane and something was wrong, it's on you, and you will be fighting for your life if that's what it comes down to. So that really, I guess, was like this most intense way for me to learn about self-responsibility. And I started to kind of look through that islands onto my business and everything, and how I make decisions, how I sell my business, everything. And actually since then, things started to look up so much more. So I think I feel maybe an extra bit more mature than I was 6 months ago.
Right.
So that really changes your mindset. It really does, doing something that absolutely scares you and learning from it, and taking that also to other parts of your life, like your business, for example.
Right. Well, certainly. And yeah, when you know that you're able to overcome it or move through the fear or whatever it is, it does give you confidence. It gives you a kind of like, I think it gives you like a little bit of joy inside somehow, where it's like really like, oh, that was, you're sort of impressed yourself somehow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're just like, can't believe I even did it. And you're just like happy that you took on the challenge. And it's, when you meet other challenges, like you said, in business or other parts of your life, that's something that you can kind of fall back on as a feather in your cap. You're like, wait a second, I jump out of planes for a living. I can do business, right?
Yeah.
That's really cool. Well, we just got a few minutes left on the podcast here, and usually I'd like to ask people about technology, but we already talked about that. So I just want to ask you this one final question, and that is, can you share a reinvention revelation with everyone? Something that through skydiving, through starting your business, through trying to work in Guatemala, which is like a foreign country from where you grew up, and whatever, through all these reinventions that you've gone through so far, and you're only 35. That's one amazing thing about it. What can you share with other people, something that you've learned that might help them along their journey?
Sure. I think, trying new things. I realized that every single one of these crazy ideas that I got, whether it was becoming an architect in the first place, or starting a charity in Guatemala, or, then becoming, learning and studying about business and marketing and becoming a consultant. Just give yourself a chance and really, what the heck with it, try kind of thing. Because what I realized is that every single time I gave myself a chance at something like that, I reinvented myself in some way. Certainly, I remember 2 years ago when I started this consultancy business properly, and I started my podcast. You can guys even see when you go onto YouTube, my first video, I interviewed someone. I'm sitting there all so stiff and like super stressed.
Right.
Oh my God, I'm live talking to an audience.
Right.
People on YouTube are going to watch me. And I was sitting there like not smiling, my face super serious. I actually sound like,
right.
I don't know, like at a funeral, just saying some words and not smiling because I was so stressed.
Mm-hmm.
And now these interviews come really, really natural. I'm not even thinking about it. And when did that happen? I didn't have a goal of being, easygoing or to be confident on camera, or doing this kind of stuff. That never even crossed my mind. It just happened.
Right.
And so you take on the challenge, your goal is somewhere else with your heart, with your passion, but then other things happen, and this year also more and more I've been invited to speak at conferences and events and give lectures, and I had to break through that another wall of public speaking, and I found a new passion for it. I want to become better at it, and it's like I haven't started all of this to become a public speaker, but now having these opportunities, I really love that, and I love myself for that too, for being able to go out there and do it. And so it is like sometimes you don't even realize what other benefits you get from trying something new. So you become all around like a better person, I guess, through all of these experiences.
Yeah, I think so. And some of those things you're saying about, the world's changed now. So, you have to show up in the world a little bit differently. Like maybe you do have to do a podcast or go to a conference and present or be on YouTube or whatever. Like, years ago that would be like, there's no way I'm doing that. I'm a shy person. That's not happening, but now it's just to kind of be in the world, you kind of have to be a little bit different. I think it's cool because it's sort of, it helps you get out of your ego a little bit, no matter what, because the light's reflected on you. Instead of being running and being scared, you got to kind of grow through the moment and embrace some of this stuff. And like you said, it makes you a better person, I think, in the end, at least it can if you're open to it.
Yeah, it does. And also I feel like, if, for example, someone came to me and told me, you need to speak to a big audience and whatnot, I would probably get really scared, and I would have all this inner saboteur speak saying, I'm not good enough for it. I don't know how to public speak. It's fearful. It's scary. But because my attention went completely into other things, and when I started doing that, I was doing it for all the other reasons, the reasons of wanting to start a business, the reasons of finding clients, of wanting to change people's lives and add value and all that stuff, that I wasn't thinking, my mind and the attention of my mind wasn't going into the fact that I actually have to perhaps become better at the camera or publicly speak. Right. And it came as a bonus. And so it was easier to adapt that new personality in a way because I wasn't making it into a big deal.
That's right.
And so I think that when you take on all these different challenges, some other parts of you also refine themselves, and you become more refined on all these other facets of your personality that then you sit back one day and you say, oh, wow, this is quite cool. I didn't realize that I'm also going to learn something like that through doing it, you know? And that's amazing. That really is.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah. When you get out of focusing on yourself and you're just trying to focus on the value that you can provide or connecting with others, I mean, it's awesome. Awesome. Well, Sara, it's been great having you on the podcast. If people are interested in connecting with you or finding out more about you or getting some of your, financial impetus that you can share with people that you can help architects with, where would they go? Where would they find you?
Sure. So I think the best is to find me online. SaraKolata.com is my website. There's all my social media links, but also just under Sara Kolata, you can find me on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. I've got a Facebook page and Facebook personal profile that you can add me to as well. And I like to think of myself as an approachable person. So don't hesitate to send me a message on any social media and we can have a chat.
Okay, sounds good. And of course, those links will be in the show notes, so you can find them there. So, Sara, thanks again.
Thank you so much, Jim. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. If you want to hear more, join our mailing list at JimJim'sReinventionRevolution.com. See you next time, and remember, the revolution has just begun. So dig in, embrace the process of reinvention, and start realizing the success you've always dreamed of. Hey revolutionaries, if you enjoyed today's episode and today's guest, let them know by commenting on their Facebook page, finding their Twitter handle or Instagram feed, and letting them know you heard them on Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, and tell them what you got out of the episode, what you really liked, or how they inspired you. I know they would get a kick out of it and will help others find the same value that you found.